Thank you.
Got one. Last time though.
Are you done?
What's happening? Somebody
Thank you. You're so good at this.
Caitlin, are you all ready?
I'm ready, and we're live on YouTube.
Right. Okay, well, let's get started. For the record, it's October 24th, 2 minutes after 1 o'clock. This is the continuing collective bargaining negotiations between Pasco and Hernando State College and United Faculty of Florida. It's been a couple of months since we met, so thank you all for the patience. You know, a lot has been going on. We're fortunate to have President Dr. Hall with us today, and in a minute I'm going to turn it over to him. But I want to just explain what we've handed out. We have brought a draft proposal to you all, so full book proposal. It's draft for a couple of reasons. One, you'll notice when we get through, and I'll let Dr. Hall speak to it, that the compensation article, which is Article 9, doesn't have the figures filled in. Don't speak to that. We do have a proposal on that today, but we are still in the process of crunching numbers and whatnot. And it's draft because we've been putting together, we wanted to really have something for you all in paper today to review. Because frankly, we're hopeful to try and run on a bit of an aggressive timeline. Because we're hoping that we can try and work out something before November's Board of Trustees meeting. If we end up with an agreement and get it ratified, then some of this can obviously go into effect. That's a tall order, but we want to at least take a shot at that. We are also in that regard looking at, we have a meeting set for November 7th already, but we're hoping we could also meet next week if after you hear our proposal. You may have questions and things that it's a lot that you have in front of you to digest all in one sitting, obviously. And we don't intend to go through every article today. Get bogged down in the minutia. So we're thinking if you all are available, and I know that probably everybody's not going to be available, but even if a sizable contingent is available maybe next week, we were looking at a date, I want to say next Thursday. Does that sound? Let's see. So y'all can, when you break, can see if we can make this work. So we have an extra date.
Tuesday, 3:30.
Okay, Tuesday, 28th, 3:30 or 4:30 would be available to meet as well. So when you talk amongst yourselves, see if you can make that work. I think you'll have some questions and whatnot from this, so some of that can be fielded in that hour. And we're still obviously talking about keeping the November 7th date on the calendar. But if we can get some additional discussion between today and that date, it probably would be helpful.
There were some questions about the timing. So what we'll do is we'll look at options and we can also try to find out.
So what you have here is a full book proposal. It's a little bit different than the expired contract. Dr. Hall in a minute is going to kind of give you his high level view of what the college is trying to achieve with this, as well as what we're proposing on compensation. We're hopeful we can get something put in place. Our hope is by November. I think you also were handed out the compensation study that's the other packet that you have is we were just provided this week with compensation analysis done by this outside group, which has informed kind of what the compensation proposals will be today, and we can discuss some of that as well. With that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hall. I'm not sure Dr. Hall normally is not at the negotiations for this, but and I'm not sure he's going to be at future ones. I think we play that by ear. I'm happy that he's been able to join us for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, he's only been here 4 months, so he's spent the last month, I think he'll say, taking a fresh look at everything and trying to figure out the best path forward. So while that somewhat causes us to have to reset what we've been doing up until now, I think it's actually a good opportunity. And two, he's the best person to describe what the vision he has and the board has going forward, and why we think this proposal that we're putting before you is a fair and a really good proposal. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, it's great to be here with you. And of course, part of this today, I was planning on being here anyways, but of course, Dr. Philly is usually involved in these conversations, but I think everybody saw the email yesterday and just the updates regarding him. So keep him in your thoughts as he continues to recover, but I'll do my best to try to get into the details and the weeds and make sure we have a good, productive conversation. So some things I'm going to say to start out with are going to be very familiar. I mean, look, coming into this 4 months in, trying to make sure that we're aligning budget, we're aligning strategy when it comes to implementing the strategic plan that was really underway before I got here, had been developed. And you've heard me talk about how do we move that from vision into action and the things that we want to continue to focus on. And one of our goals is around academics and looking at the quality of teaching and instruction and things that we need to continue to do across the college. There are some things that I will tell you, if you heard me talk about readiness last week at All College Day, we got to look at how we're building readiness across the board. Doesn't matter which campus you're on, what role you're in, readiness applies to every single team member of this college and the things that we have to do to, again, prepare for the rapid growth that's going to continue to hit. What you're going to see in the collective bargaining agreement, I know we had our meeting a week and a half ago now, dates are running together, but had a chance to meet with some of the union leadership. And in there, I talked about how, the goals are the goals. We've got those outlined in the strategic plan, but I'm also about trying to make sure that we spend the right energy on the right things. And I want to make sure, I've said this before, spending first-class energy on first-class issues, not spending it on things that are going to, distract us from the ultimate goal. And it's also about how do we, and you get used to my sayings, not major in the minors. I want to make sure that, again, we streamline things and that we focus on the things that are going to move the needle on the outcomes we have to accomplish here, not only for our students, but at the same time, as someone who's been a teacher, parents of both teachers, it starts with good quality teaching and learning, and it starts with the instruction. So I want to make sure that we frame the agreement and the things that we're working towards to support you being able to do your jobs and do your jobs well across the board, but also make sure you've got the things that I think I've been hearing and listening to about time for planning, things that we need to be doing for professional development and professional growth, looking at how do we have time for collaboration, things that, again, I think I've heard, and if I missed, I want you all to tell me, but those are things that I think I've heard value and importance coming from faculty across the board. Just last week, we had conversations about how do we spend more professional development time on things like school safety, response systems. All those things being considered, the proposal that you have in front of you and the things I want to talk about today are really honed on those priorities. And in a few minutes, I'm going to give some high-level overview of some of the elements that are encompassed here. I'll come back at the end once I give Teresa an opportunity to kind of walk through the compensation analysis. And then I'm going to talk to you about just a little bit more on the hard numbers of what we want to propose when it comes to compensation. Okay? Some things that I would tell you that I'm confident hopefully will be positive news. This came out of the conversation last week is how do we do the one-to-one on the labs? That's in here. That means we have to fund it, which means we have to work into those pieces. So there's a lot of things we're going to do there, but that's not a financial impact, but you'll see in here that we've done the one-to-one. Other things that you're going to see in here that, are important to me is how do we make sure that we have the ability to be agile in our recruitment and our hiring strategies. And I know these can be pain points, but I'm going to tell you, I have spent the last 4 months not only talking to all of you, but I've been spending the last 4 months talking to my peers and colleagues across the state, trying to better understand how different institutions are accomplishing and implementing not only their agreements, but their strategies to support their staffing needs. We have some areas of our college when it comes to faculty and in the areas of teaching and learning different programs that have higher demand that we have a hard time filling. A good example of that is I'm sitting right now, I think, with 4 nursing instructors. So you're gonna see us in here, looking at some ability to have flexibility in some of that compensation. Because we need to be able to have that agility to fill those positions for limited access programs. And it's not just in health, it's gonna be in IT areas and other areas that are hard to fill when you've got hard caps on what you can offer in those positions. So you're gonna see some variance in here that we wanna entertain. And again, it's not unique to this agreement. There's other colleges out there that have unions that have the same things in place. And that's so that we can have the adjustments necessary to, again, fill those hard demand positions that, again, this region has already made it clear that it's important. I mean, you look at the healthcare industry coming in, things you've heard me talk about before, I have to be able to have the conditions in place to fill those positions. So you're gonna see some variance in here that we're proposing. A couple other things that I'll just kind of highlight before we turn it over to the compensation discussion is that we've got to look at, well, it's going to come back to the teaching and planning time. I want to talk about that. But I think what I'll do is maybe, Teresa, have you dive into kind of an overview of the Hanover study and some of the things we looked at, because the things I want to dive into next get into some of the compensation discussion I want to move into, okay? So with that, Teresa, kick it over to you.
So I will start out by going to actually the Hanover study on that additional packet. And so if you go to, this was just completed October 2025, it's current, it's recent. And it was, if you look at the very first page, it talks about it's specific to faculty salaries among the two-year peer competitors and colleges in Florida. So it is all community or state colleges. When you look at the following area, it talks about key findings and recommendations. So that's like, these are back to back. So the page that looks like this with the key findings. Within the key findings, those are on the right-hand side. I think the first and the last are the most critical for some of our discussions. And it has to do, this is talking about salary ranges, okay? So when we talk about salary ranges overall, it talks about based on educational levels. It says bachelor's degree and master's degree. It's showing that we are slightly above the peer averages. If you look at the bottom component of that, it says that the minimum salaries for master's and doctoral degrees are slightly below the peer average. So there's some disparity in terms of based on the educational levels, you're either higher or lower than the peers. And there are, if you want to look more specifically, at this page here, it'll show you what the averages are and what the highs and the lows are on these here. And these are divided by the different education levels. So you see bachelor's, master's plus 30, and doctorate degrees. That'll show you the details of that. But the overall finding from Hanover research is that, you know, we have some areas that were above and some areas that were below the average for our peer institutions. On the left-hand side, on that first area, it does have some recommendations. And so under their recommendations, it does talk about implementing some minor increases to the minimum salary rates, that's our starting salaries, at the master's and doctoral levels on the 9-month contracts. And again, it talks a little bit about underneath that, you know, the reason you would want to do that is to help attract more experienced faculty with higher degree attainment levels, which could lead to a positive impact on course quality. Right under that, towards the middle of this section here, it says at the high end of our range, we're significantly above our peer institutions. So what the recommendation is to go, when you talk about the range, increase the base, but freeze or lower the top. Okay, that's what this here is the recommendation that it's providing. It says PHSC's maximum salary rates across all educational attainment levels are well above peer averages, typically by at least $15,000 and by over $25,000 at the doctoral level. If PHSC is seeking to align with peer colleges, it could potentially cut these maximum rates or temporarily freeze maximum pay increases. So that's at the top level area of that range. Now, that being said, we don't have a lot of employees that are at that top range anyway. So if we froze it or if we decrease it, it really wouldn't have an immediate impact on anybody, okay? The other consideration with it, that is kind of the big ideas with this study. You have the whole report there if you would like to look at it more in depth. The other component of it is that what's on your first page though, because when we talk about the salaries, these are just based on just averages that are provided across the board. But when you take that into consideration along with the actual number of days of the contract and hours worked per week, it does make it more significant when we're talking about how we compare to sister institutions. So this front page only considers the ones that are in our immediate surrounding, the counties that are in our immediate surrounding. And it has the years for the agreements that are on there. So if you take the number of days in the contract, other than Hillsborough Community College, that's 160 days, the PHSC faculty work less days overall than all other institutions, again, with exception with Hillsborough County Community College. Then for hours worked per week, PHSC is at 30 hours. All others are at 35, except Polk State College, and in that one, there's a little asterisk on it because they don't have an actual number, a max. There is no determined max number of hours as within their, they don't have a union. They're not specified, but it does say that they're gonna have at least 25 student contact hours plus other assigned duties. So I was very conservative and I was like, let's put 5 hours as like very conservative. We don't have anything in writing. I had some conversations with their staff over there. Like, we don't have a specific number of what that is, and they didn't have it readily available for this discussion. So I was very conservative and leaving it at 30 hours. So I could have just left it NA because they don't have it, but I did want to put that in there so that you had some level of comparison when you talk about what the work week and workload overall, when we're talking about required attendance or what's the right word? Yes, required attendances for the college. Okay. Yes.
So I know this was done by Hanover, but do you know what went into?
I'm sorry, the front page was not Hanover. That was
Okay.
information that I collected.
Oh, okay,
So the
So what
Hanover
is-
report is after.
okay, got it. So
Okay.
for the 35, like if we look at HCC's collective bargaining agreement,
Mm-hmm.
do you know what that 35 was? Because I think they also teach 15 contact hours and also have 10 office
Yeah,
hours.
this is the total number of hours that are required across all I did not break it down into student-to-student contact hours.
Okay,
Faculty student contact hours. I just said overall, the total number of hours, that's what it amounts to. That's what their work week amounts to.
Okay, so just to clarify, so hours worked per week would be either they're on campus working or
It
like we
included
have done
the
remote,
teaching-
you can do your 5 hours remotely.
Right, so it includes the actual teaching hours, it includes the office hours, and it includes all the other activities, professional development, committee work, that sort of thing. So that's everything that was within their agreements, that's what is reflected here. So we could break it down further. I mean, I have all of the agreements, I can break it down, but I think this was, as a broader discussion, this is what it was trying to point out, that even if we're saying we're slightly lower on the compensation for certain areas, we're also working less hours overall. Okay, so that's part of the thought process of why I wanted to include this information as well, okay?
It's just so fuzzy because there's no working of less hours. We know that is true.
I get that.
I don't,
So-
I,
So
I'm
that's
saying
where
what's
maybe
established-
defining it better
Right.
for our college,
Right.
and if they've done a better job defining it, then that will help us realize, oh, no, we are doing 35.
Right.
So we're not really comparing apples to apples.
Well, I think in this case, we're comparing contracted hours to contracted hours.
Right, and that's what.
Right. And I think that was,
Absolutely.
the exercise here was just to kind of show
Define that.
what does one contract have for their contracted hours versus this. We're not saying guys are working less, I'm just saying, in general, there's just what's in there for comparison.
So with the Hanover study, then they compared minimum and maximum salaries. That's all they looked at.
They look, yes,
Did
across
they
all
look
of the
at
colleges.
medians or,
Not with this study. So
Okay.
we are still working with them, and so there is some consideration of getting additional, but this is what they could provide within the time frame that we have asked them to do that.
okay,
And I think the biggest and most critical piece of information that this provides is what we need to do to attract more employees at, coming in at that minimum range. So I think that that's what part of the discussion is around this, is what we need to do for that group.
and then do you have the cost of the contract for the Hanover study?
It was actually a contract that was implemented before I got here.
Okay,
Dr. Kaiser had it, and they had some work capacity, so they didn't have a specific scope on a particular project, so I asked them to go and take this on, because that was part of their portfolio of work that they offered,
so they're continuing to do other work at this time?
if we asked them to,
Okay,
up to what's in the contract. Because to go through a procurement at this point, to get all of that, and have somebody that does that work, we could go, that would probably take another 2-3 months by the time you get that through procurement. This was a contract that was already in place before I got here. They did not have a scope of work that they were working on at that point in time. So knowing that was in their menu of options, I asked them to go and take that on.
Very good.
yeah. And how much was that contract for?
I'd have to go back.
And the
But it's not
peers-
just one study. It's, I
Yeah.
think they have they can do a number of studies within that contract, so it's
So
not
there's,
this one.
so there's a contract, but not all of the work has been allotted yet?
Mhm.
And so we have more available work we can ask Hanover to do?
Potentially.
Yeah, I can
Yes.
go back and follow up on that and see what I've asked them to do.
And the peer institutions that were part of this study with Hanover were just 3, Central Florida, Tallahassee.
No, there's actually another sheet, but it wasn't legible when I tried to print it out. It's a spreadsheet. Yeah. So we can give you the detail, but you aren't gonna be able to read it anyway if I tried to print it.
Okay.
But again, we can email us so you have it.
And just for clarification, we have asked them to go back and look at the work week hours as part of this study. So that is something that we have asked them to do, to compare as well, so that it's an independent person or agency or entity that's doing that verification of all this information, just so you know. That's it.
Any other questions for Teresa?
I've got all mine, does anybody else have some?
Is there a larger report that we would be able to be presented with further methods?
The data set, the method, there was something in here with methodology.
Yeah,
There's a
it spoke to
section
it,
on
but
that.
Doesn't have
But
specifics.
the other pieces are data sets. It doesn't have specifically, yeah.
I think you've got everything except the spreadsheet, correct? So-
The spreadsheet with the actual data.
Any other
Yeah,
questions?
I'm asking specifically, like, if PHSC is included in the averages, for example, some methodology like that.
Okay.
Are we gonna go through the proposed CBA or are we
At
gonna?
a very high level, I wanted to be able to
Sarah?
give you time to kind of talk through it and look at it, because again, I'm not going to sit here and read to you.
Okay.
But happy to have you kind of take the time to look at it and ask questions. But what I will talk about,
Normally we would have a strike-through copy so we could see the original agreement, which is in place right now, and then the changes.
yeah, we can try to provide that to you, but I would tell you that it's probably not, a lot of this was built kind of as a brand new version, so we can provide you what we got. I mean, nothing to hide, but I would say this is significantly truncated, and I would put the caveats on there that anything that's under federal law, state law, things like that, those are not being bargained, because those are not bargainable units, because they're already protected under state and federal law. That's why we focused on those things that truly, going back to what are the things that we're bargaining between the college and with the union.
It just helps to be able to see what has been in place and what is in place legally.
We can get you the original version if you'd like to compare them side by side.
I mean, we have the
We
original.
have the
Yeah, we do that here.
Brian, what do people usually do? Is there usually a strike-through copy or?
And you can do anything, so it's up to the parties. I mean, what I've done, what you can do is had just a word comparison, we'll do that.
Word, okay, so if you send us a Word
It's-
document,
I could do that, yeah, I've emailed it to you.
Oh, you have, okay.
I should mention at the outset, we just got it finalized, so, but if you and John have it in your email, should have put you on as well, but you have it, the Word version in your emails waiting for you, hopefully. You can run it, and what I think Dr. Hall is saying is the agreement is in large respects different to the extent that if you run, as I did, a comparison, it looks like it's more substantial change really than it is, but we move things around and whatnot, so.
Yeah.
From our perspective, we're operating off of this document. We started just to have the background of looking at the old document, do some track changes and things, but it got to the point where we were changing so much that it was becoming unwieldy. So we put it to you as simple as we could. But, and as you go through it, I think you'll see that a lot of the stuff in there hasn't changed. It might be moved around with, but it is slimmed down. There are things in there we thought were not necessary. And that's the parts that you'll see that are primarily different. And if you want to speak to
I think a good example is like, we talked about this in our meeting, the public records portion. Their statute, we cite the statute about public records, and you can request and get anything that you could, if anything. But like I said, to have that spelled out in 4 or 5 paragraphs on a page when it's all about public records anyways. You cite the public records statute, and that way you can request it just like anybody else.
Well,
Okay.
part of the appeal of having a CBA is having all the policies in one place. Like when we were first organizing, that was one of the big selling points for a lot of faculty. Is like, I just want to go to one place. I don't want to check an IMM. I don't want to check a board rule. I don't want to figure out IMM, da 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 da, right? So they wanted just a place for everything to go. And having things that are laws in the CBA just means that everyone's aware of it. And it doesn't hurt anything. And as a collective bargaining agreement, if the law changes, the law would supersede the union contract. So for us, I think really having, even if it's a law, having that in one place, everything I need to know about my employment issues. I don't think the point of a CBA is to be as streamlined or as short as possible. The point of the CBA is to be as clear as possible.
And I can definitely appreciate what you're saying, but I guess for me, it's disingenuous to put something as it's been collectively bargained when it's not being bargained and it's in law.
So maybe you can keep it as a separate addendum or something like that.
Again, I'm not trying to be, I'm just saying in general, we're not bargaining for law, we're bargaining for work conditions and compensation. And I think to put something in there as if that is part of a bargaining agreement, it's really not. I mean, it's just not at the end of the day. So, again, I think that's disingenuous in the process.
You could put as outlined in Florida statute, da 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 da. So then it's clear that people can then go to that
And
statute.
I think that's where we
changes.
try to make sure that we can do that. And again, it's not much of a difficult, it's just that, like I said, major and the minors, I want to focus on the things that at the end of the day are the most critical pieces that help to ensure that you guys continue to do your jobs well, and compensate you in a competitive way that helps to drive the outcomes we're working towards.
You'll see in the drafts, again, I don't know if you want to get into the minutia of all that, but some of the articles do have those kind of references in there. We took out the board rule or IMM, but have a reference in it, so I get what you're saying, but there is no real way of simplifying it in a way that I think you're trying to do, because there are lots of rules, lots of things, some of which pertain to the faculty, some of which don't, some of which are more operational, but also touch on other things. So you're always going to have board rules, you're always going to have the laws, you're going to have some internal policies. There are some big ticket items where it should probably be in the contract, even if not spelled out, but by reference, and we've kept that in there. We think we've done a reasonable job of keeping that with references and whatnot. On other things where it's common sense or not really necessary, we've taken that out.
But I think at that point, I think that the concern there is if we've got an agreement right now that's already 2 years old, it's been expired. There's been laws and there's been changes since then. And if you're trying to use that as your single source of truth to go back to a reference, things change. Now you've got misinformation that looks like this is something that's in law and it's really not current any longer. But if we're referencing that and there's changes, then you've got the most current citation to go back and look and see what those current options look like.
If you want to touch on the rest of it, so
Yeah.
some of it that you only heard part of the vision. So here's and we're presenting this kind of as a whole package, trying to, obviously there's some compromise and we're asking you to do some things that you probably would rather not do, but there is the plus side as well, so.
Yes, so, one of the things that, if you go back to the last board meeting, there was funding that was allocated for encumbrance and salaries and things like that. So one of the things that's gonna happen for every team member here at the college that's eligible is we're doing a 3% salary increase. So again, there's some things in there with eligibility based on hire dates, there's things like that that we will work through, and those are things that have been in place before. So, so the 3%. One of the things that I also wanna do though is, and I don't know if I misread the room with some of the facial expressions, but the 30-hour limitation or 30 hours of work, some of you might think that you're already doing well beyond that. So I'm hoping this next part is going to be something that's a little bit more of an incentive. But if we are seeing individuals are working 35 hours a week doing things, then let's make sure we capture that. And I will say that we're looking at adjusting the hours to be 35. It's not more instructional time, but it's collaboration, professional development. But with that, I'm working towards a 5 to 7% increase on top of the 3%. So you're talking an 8 to 10% increase in compensation total. And that's looking at, again, yes, we would move to the 5 hours. I know it's not a one-to-one match, but if you're going to be in professional development, you're doing emails, you're doing things to support student learning, I'm not going to sit here and talk to you about how do we invest in our students and not invest in our faculty, okay? And the best way for me to do that is to support you to do the job as well, give you the planning time and the things you need to do. I'm hoping, well, I know there's some difference of opinions about the statutes and the laws and things like that. I always, let me say, as clear as kind. I want this to be as clear as possible so that we can get in, focus on the compensation pieces, focus on things like the lab hour, which you told me the other day you guys have been working on that for years. Nothing is falling on deaf ears, but I'm trying to make sure that I can make strategic investments that are sustainable. There's 2.1 million that's carved out in the last budget amendment. If you go back and look at the board packet, you'll see it in there. I'm probably going to mess up the terms, but it says staff something and encumbered expenses. So we're working through that. And that's, well, I'd say 5 to 7% because we're going to see how far we can stretch it up to 7. But I would challenge, and this is not meant to sound diminishing, disrespectful, or anything at all, but I would challenge any place else right now where you're seeing an 8 to 10% salary increase on the table for discussion to invest in your faculty. But there are some things that I'm asking for in turn. I need some flexibility in areas so I can get hard to reach positions filled. I mean, and candidly, some of the nursing instructor positions, things like that. I'm not saying it's the only ones, but they'll probably see more than the 8 to 10% because I've got to make sure I'm taking care of those positions to keep them. But I've got to get those vacancies filled because otherwise we're not going to meet the workforce demands of this region. And we have to decide, are we going to double down and create the conditions to meet that demand, or are we going to be on the sidelines and watch it become obsolete? And as president, I can't allow that to happen. But I'm not coming to you asking you for something that in turn I'm not trying to invest in your capacity to do. So I wanted to kind of share those things with you. I will say, yes, I'm trying to move this to November as quickly as possible because the sooner we get it done, the sooner we get it done. I'm even trying to explore options to see if I can make the 3% retro back to July 1st. The 7%, because I'm kind of correlating that, candidly, to the 5 hours. That would be whatever point in time we get those, the 5 to 7%. Once we get to that agreement, then that would kick in at that point in time. But that 3%, if we can get that part done and negotiated and finalized, then I can get that back to July 1st. Hopefully, retro. We'll work for that and see. But the 3%, again, as president, yes, I've got a responsibility to faculty, but I've got a responsibility to every single team member across this college. So I'm taking care of everybody with 3%. I'm investing in your capacity with professional learning and development for the additional 5 hours with that 5 to 7% so we can get there. And so I want to pause there for just a few minutes and see if you're going to invite me out of the room.
No, but, well, we do appreciate, absolutely, and I don't think we've ever felt like things were falling on deaf ears for sure. Just coming from the history of our negotiating, this is quite different. We have not had administration come with things to us. We have the proposals, there's some tweaking, it takes a very long time. We've come up with some more proposals. So this is unique, and we do appreciate it. The timeline is scary because we are working full-time and in our classrooms and our prep and all of that. So it's absolutely encouraging, right? And I think we speak for everyone. It's just, it's a lot to digest and to think, okay, here's the original CBA and here's some, the suggested new thing that's going to have quite a bit to wrap our head around. And how do we do that in 5 days and still teach our classes?
And one of the things that I wanted to put out there, and I should have started with this, I think I said a little bit, but I didn't say it clearly. strategic plan has to be the North Star on which we're trying to create the conditions to work towards. We had things that we learned through SAC COC that were potential blind spots, things that we got to work on and go back to the quality of instruction. And I think we have bad quality, but there are some conditions in there with workload and things like that that we have to continue to pay attention to with rules. I think everybody knows we're taking some big steps in trying to update and modernize our board rules and our procedures. You hear me say clear as time, but you also have to be able to build trust. There's nothing behind the curtain. What you see is what you see. We're on the stage, full front, right here, talking and having some opportunities to kind of move things forward. But I think when you put too much in the CBA that has conditions outside of the CBA that can change because as law change and things evolve, you've got to document, because I was asked during that last meeting, can I train the leadership and the others on what the CBA looks like? If I'm training them on things year over year that are outdated because laws change every year, things get updated. So we have to go back and reference it anyways and find out what that information is to keep things current. Let's keep the main thing the main thing. And then the things that evolve, we work through that together. Okay? But I want to give you kind of the guardrails and the parameters in which I approach this, working with the team. And I want to give a lot of credit to the team because we have been working hand in hand. I wanted the team to kind of come back and talk to me and say, what are the things that we need to solve? What are the things we have to work through? What are the conditions that exist? And I was asked questions before, like how much work have I done, directly with unions in the past? I haven't. And no offense, but I'm never going to refer to you guys as union, but I will refer to you as part of this team. And as one team, we're going to get some things done. And I do believe in taking care of folks, but I also have to make sure that we're creating the conditions for that rapid growth that we're going to see. And it's here, it's coming, and collectively, I think we need each other's help to get there. So.
Can I add a couple of things? Please. One, I think, is noted, this is a different proposal than we've had in the past. I know we've been talking for at least 3, probably 4 years about the 1-to-1 ratio, and you all have heard me and others tell you, we've always, I think, agreed to the concept, but balked at the money. And the money is still just as costly as it was last year, probably more costly. But there's a commitment there for that. Not only the potentially 8 to 10% range that we're looking at when you incorporate the 5-7 plus the 3%, and that's part of why it's in draft. Is that Dr. Hall mentioned we've got to crunch the numbers and have to stay under that budgeted amount of 2.1, and whether that's 5% or 7%.
And I think at that point, like I said, the 2.1 was allocated, but when we first had this conversation, I didn't have that $300,000 or $400,000 more what we think the costs are going to be for the lab expense. Didn't have that in the original 2.1 we requested. So there's some things there that, again, when you hear me giving ranges, I'm giving ranges because there's some things that I got to work. And we're going to crunch those numbers next week.
So the timeline is aggressive. We recognize that. So on that, which is part of why I raised the specter of maybe trying to get together next week, even if it's for just a more of a working session, so that you understand we're not going to be able to go through the whole contract today. And I don't think we want to get bogged down in a lot of that minutia that we would have in the prior negotiations. Spent 6 months going over this comma, that comma. There is no board meeting in December, so to enact some of this stuff, we have to get it in November. Otherwise, you're pushing it out into next semester. The contract, this is a 3-year contract, but it does have, you'll see there, the compensation is opened, can be opened every year, plus 3 additional articles. So I don't, what's the adage? You don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good. If we can't get everything done, give Dr. Hall and his team an opportunity. And at most, we're stuck with something, if it's not working on either side of coming back. At this point, we'd be back probably negotiations in the spring or budget time in whatever, May, June anyway. So the alternative is we get bogged down and we're still negotiating in May or June for this year, which is what we, as you all know, kind of done in the past. So hopefully we can get it together. We're not trying to ram it down, but that's the reason for the timeline. And we were hoping to meet before this point in time, but we didn't have this available. And we also are putting it together more as a draft than it otherwise would be, in part because it's a lot. And if we drop down on you next week or November 7th and said you got a week to look at it, obviously that wasn't going to work. So
I would reinforce, we have worked literally as quickly as we possibly could to start putting these things together between I mean, let's face it, there's been some changes in some leadership positions. So there's been a lot of new folks prepared to dive into these conversations from budgeting to what we can support to sustain, because once we commit to these, it's not like the one-time investment where it doesn't become a recurring cost, it becomes a recurring cost. And that means we have to make sure that we've got the conditions in there to sustain it. So I'm trying to be very responsible with that, so that once we commit, because I think in past, we've done some one-time investments here and there, because we didn't know if we had the capacity to sustain. I'm coming to this with the goal of sustaining this. So it's a big lift, but that puts a lot on us as a leadership team to make sure that we manage the finances responsibly, and we look at other areas where we can make efficiencies. And that's not anything negative, that's just good business. So, but I'm hopeful that, again, next week we can come together, and I'm hoping that there's some compassion and grace here when you think about that in 4 months. We've been able to try to get to this point as quickly as we can, and these have been conversations that have been going on for quite some time. We're trying to move, and we're trying to do it in a way that helps us stay focused on the things we got to do.
And when is the board meeting in November?
18.
I have go ahead.
I was just gonna state that one of the pieces that I think will bring a lot of questions, and maybe I can address it early on now, is the relabeling of the
That's a great point.
classifications. And so maybe that is something we can touch upon, but you were gonna follow up on his question, so go ahead and do that.
Yeah, so with the 35, let me see it. My question is, what would the 35 versus 30 hours a week look like in practice? I mean,
It's
I
in
don't
here.
have a quarter-hour timesheet here, but.
No, I think it's in here. I would say if you have feedback on it, let us know. But it's
Okay.
not adding instructional work, it's adding essentially planning campus college activities, things like that to the 5 hours.
Okay, and there's not like a timesheet or,
No.
Yeah, okay.
I have to say, I don't want to sound judgmental, I don't know what you guys do know about that, so this is
Okay.
probably where I'm still grass top.
It's on
Grass top
8.1
numbers.
if you wanted to reference.
okay, so it's 10 hours, maybe used to engage in professional development, fulfill instructional and programmatic obligations as outlined in this article, or for participation in campus or college activities. Okay.
So this seems to be in kind of some blocks that I'm looking at it from how we approach the next 2 weeks,
Mhm.
right? So we have, for example, the increase in hours as like one block. Then we have the hard to fill category as like a second block. For example, on the hard to fill, how long or are you ready to already designate the areas that you feel are hard to fill, or when would you be able to let us know what you're proposing in that space?
I mean, I think I can tell you anecdotally, I mean, some of the ones that I've had vacancies for, I mean, I go to the nursing instructor because that's one that's very apparent. But as we look at some of the regional demand, and what you've all heard previous conversations even with the board, what are we doing in the space of AI certifications and degrees? What are we doing in the space of cyber? I can't tell you what that demand is gonna look like yet, because it's new programs that we're gonna have to figure out how to start developing and cultivating and launching, and that's gonna bring about things that we don't know yet. So I say that's where the ability to have some degree of flexibility. Look, there's nothing higher by salaries public once you put it out there. So it's not that there's going to be some secrets happening behind the scenes. It's going to be what does market analysis show us that we have to be able to hire those positions for, but give us a variance in which to work so that we can recruit those individuals and get them on the team to deliver the programs we have to have.
Yeah, I'm hearing you on the agile portion of that, right? So being able to designate those categories, but then secondarily, that comes to undesignating those categories, for example. So for example, as we start to talk about this structure, we might be looking at things like, well, how do you define it? How long does the definition last? How does it get retracted if it is retracted? So that we don't have something where it's like, all right, well, 35% increase, and then 6 months later, it's pulled back, and you have faculty investing in that, for example. So, these are the things I'm spitballing of things that we're looking at that would be structural in nature, that we need to kind of look at these different components, put them together, because we have to do so very quickly.
Can I say to that point, because there's some of the colleges out there that use those variances, we can look to see how they divide some of that.
Great, exactly. So when would we be looking at, like, if we can get you back some of that today, is that something you can look to work on for the next week and then the following? So like we could break to go through and kind of brief on this and then try to come back with some of those blocks of areas we need to look at for next week.
I think the sooner you get us, we will obviously do everything that we can to answer any questions that we can.
Right.
I mean, just like this is a priority for you, it's a priority for us, but, but if I have like, not that I'm picking on Dr. Building things, but there might be some clarifying questions I need to ask him on a couple of things. And if he's back next week and we can get those answers, I want to loop him in because I don't want to have him disconnected from some of those conversations. But things that relate to like HR and things that we can dive into, compensation as we get into more details on running the numbers to see where we're at between the 5 and 7. We have the same urgency you guys have for those things. But again, if there's something I can't answer, I'll say I don't have it yet or that it's something in process.
Yeah, we just need to, I think we need to create kind of a framework here of how we're gonna move forward day by day in order to get the pieces where they need to be. Like, for example, we're gonna have to work on arbitration pretty extensively, but we have to go to probably up the chain to, legal advice basically, because it changed that structure quite substantially. So how do we wanna do that, Caitlin? Do we wanna break, for example, now and brief us all so we can kind of go over the changes? I've gone through the proposed contract and compared it. So we have that, so we can kind of work from there over the next 40 minutes or so, maybe break for like 30, 40 minutes, an hour.
Yeah.
Can we do that?
Can I recommend that you let me explain that component that I was
Sure.
talking about? Because it'll be part of what you want to have conversations about.
Yeah.
Because it is significant, it is different than the way it is done now. So when you currently hire in the structure, you have your categories F3, F2, F2 plus 30, and F1. So that's your bachelor, master's, master's plus 30, and doctoral. Those are the 4 levels. So what the proposal is on here, and you'll see it under section 9.1, is to somewhat substitute those with rankings, okay? Now, you have, instead of doing those 4 levels, it'll be the 4 levels of the instructor, assistant professor, assistant professor, professor, okay? But those won't be solely based on the degree, it'll be degrees plus their years of experience. So that'll be how they come classified into each of those different levels, okay? So that's a pretty significant change as to how it's done right now. I can say that currently we do have a number of faculty that have not requested instructional rank changes. So if we went this way, I would go back and we would have to look at every single employee to make sure that they're leveled correctly, because for the most part, they're under-leveled. So we want to make sure that they're leveled correctly. And then we can, as people are coming in, then you'll be able to see, where they fall in terms of not only their degree, but also their experience. Because you can have someone who comes in with a doctorate level and they've never taught, who have 0 years of experience, but they're still at F1. Do we really want to consider them professors when they're your highest level and may have 0 experience? So we're trying to do some of that leveling with that to also incorporate the experience when you're talking about starting salaries for them. Again, this is all related to starting salaries, right? But we did not take away the 1.5%, that distribution, that for the up to the 8 years of experience, that stays the same. So it just wanted to give you an idea of what it meant, because when you look at it, it doesn't jump out at you.
Okay.
Is that something that HR would have the capability to, as we move into the agreement, go back to the faculty that are under
We will commit to that, absolutely.
and be able to basically like expedite that, kind of just put people into the categories they need to,
Yes.
some minimal paperwork, and then,
Absolutely.
Okay.
And again, if that minimum pay doesn't meet that, then we would bring them up to that minimum pay for that. So yes, absolutely,
do
that would be,
comparatively from higher, that type of thing.
right. Mhm.
All right, yeah, we can commit to that, that would expedite that, okay. Anything else major that we could look at prior to breaking that you feel like might need some explanation, or? I can give you some examples maybe. We asked about the 40% categories, the hard to fill.
Hard to fill.
There was some changes to evaluation.
Yeah, on evaluation, it had to do with increasing the rankings, like where you have, because right now it's like yes or no, like it's a pass-fail, so to speak. And the pass-fail, it has a place, but it doesn't promote growth. When you have, you've partially met this, but you could really work on these skills. So this is really intended to be more of a growth mindset as opposed to just pass fail.
What was on the hard to fill, I saw something about the specialized credentials as well. Do you have any idea on those, or can you explain that?
I'm thinking if you have specialized credentials that are required for the programs that we're
Right.
teaching, I would think, like, I don't know, maybe aviation, you have to have a pilot's license or something to that, I don't know, I'm making that
But
one up.
we're not at that point yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does anyone know what other colleges offer a higher salary for hard to fill?
we,
Like something comes down to just 40%.
Like Sumter? Okay. I think St. Pete does. I don't know if HCC does. Maybe that's okay.
Tallahassee State College does as well.
okay,
I think we could give ourselves a rough education on this and then come back with some suggestions as far as questions and things that maybe we can start working on.
I kind of heard that was part of the process, about putting 700 read together. So you guys
Yeah.
go ahead and tell me more about that. Okay.
Yeah, should we come back at 3?
Should we? Thank you, appreciate you guys. All right, let's get to
We're
work.
gonna have a room next door.
Yes, yes.
Thanks, sir. Very
It's in the
good.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.